This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Coronavirus global impact. We have the latest updates from China and Africa. Dozens of people killed in clashes between rival militia in the Central African Republic. And find out why corruption has a new English word straight from the streets of Nigeria. This is CGTN. Welcome to Africa Live with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. We'll have the latest on those stories in just a moment. But first, Uche Okoronko with the day's business headlines. Uche.
Thank you, Beatrice. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Kenya's GDP is projected to grow from 5.7% to 6.2% this year. And Barrick Gold plans to ship gold worth up to $280 million from Tanzania. Of course, more on that coming up within the program. For now, it's back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. And let's begin with the latest on the coronavirus outbreak. 106 people are now confirmed to have died, all of them in China. The total number of confirmed cases globally has risen to over 4,600, with the vast majority in China. Tibet is the only region in the country without any confirmed cases. Around half of the cases are at the epicenter of the outbreak, Wuhan, the capital of Hubei province. More than 40,000 people are under medical observation after having had close contact with patients. There are now 57 confirmed cases outside China. Thailand has 14. Singapore and Japan each have 7. The United States and Australia have 5 each. Malaysia and South Korea have 4 each cases. Chinese President Xi Jinping has met with the head of the World Health Organization in Beijing. President Xi said China is taking its cooperation with the World Health Organization seriously and that it welcomes the World Health Organization experts to visit Wuhan. He added that the country is confident and capable of winning the battle against the virus. The WHO chief acknowledged China's timely response to sharing the coronavirus gene sequence. He also said that he is confident in China's ability to contain the new virus. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization is revising its assessment of the outbreak, saying the risk is, quote, very high in China and high at the regional and global levels. Now, Wuhan city, located in China's Hubei province, has been on lockdown for almost a week now. Our reporter Xu Xintian told us what the atmosphere is like there and how hospitals are dealing with the rising number of cases.
The highway is still possible for people to get inside of the city. Of course, it's not recommended, but people cannot get out. And the streets are pretty clear and quiet, but there are still vehicles running on the street and the supermarkets are still open, but not at regular hours. They open at 10 and close early in the afternoon. The Wuhan government has asked community clinics to offer more of a screening process. And the goal now is to ease the burden on Wuhan's hospitals. And with increased awareness of the coronavirus amid the flu season, fever clinics in Wuhan are packed, and some hospitals in Wuhan are in fact running on fumes. When someone feels feverish right now, it does not necessarily signify contractions of the coronavirus. Over 200 community clinics in Wuhan have started to help screen those false alarms. In the past 4 days, they screened out over 4,000 people, and also some 1,500 have been advised to self-quarantine or seek immediate treatment. Doctors I've spoken to say it's an effective strategy for now to not only ease the burden on hospitals, but also to help detect the virus at an early stage.
Well, Wuhan is expected to stay on lockdown for the foreseeable future. Our reporter from CGTN's parent organization, China Media Group, visited a typical community in the city to see for himself what daily routines had become. He found that all but one of the compound's 6 entrances had been shut, and residents have were having regular basic health checkups. A convenience store was open nearby and it was providing supplies of bottled water and snacks. There were also special bulletin boards to keep people informed of regulations and procedures. Here in Africa, Kenya remains on alert after a passenger from Guangzhou, China, was quarantined after showing flu-like symptoms. The passenger, isolated at the Kenyatta National Hospital, entered the country on Tuesday. Kenya has one of the busiest airports in Africa and has stepped up surveillance. It is screening all passengers arriving from affected countries, including China. The Kenyan government has advised against all but necessary travel to China. There are at least 85 Kenyans registered with the embassy in Wuhan. The Foreign Affairs Ministry said it is in touch with Kenyans who are in Wuhan and is closely monitoring the situation. Meanwhile, Ethiopia says 4 suspected cases have tested negative.
We wish to advise members of the public as follows. 1, the need to maintain basic hand and respiratory hygiene. 2, safe food practices need to be observed across the country. 3, avoid close contact with people suffering from acute respiratory infections. And finally, and in addition to this, anyone who is exhibiting symptoms of respiratory illness, such as fever, coughing, difficulties in breathing, sneezing, with a history of recent travel to China, is advised to go to the nearest health facility for assessment and prompt management.
We have identified one person at the airport through the heat tester, and we are holding that person under quarantine at the moment. Thereafter, a person who entered the country right after his China trip has been brought back to us alongside 2 other caretakers. So generally, we have 4 suspected cases in quarantine. The good news is that blood tests for all 4 came out negative for the coronavirus, and the patients are slowly recovering from their symptoms. In the meantime, we have sent their blood samples to South Africa for a second opinion. So far, there is no confirmed coronavirus case in Ethiopia.
Now, while no cases of coronavirus have been reported in Tunisia, the country's health ministry is taking precautions. Airports, ports and border crossings will be equipped with temperature sensors. Adnan Chauchi has the details.
Travelers suspected of being infected will be placed in an equipped, isolated room to undergo necessary analysis in a laboratory set up by the Ministry of Health.
The necessary tests are first carried out on the suspects in an isolated hall inside the Tunis Carthage airport. If the test results are positive, patients will be taken by ambulance to the isolation units at the hospital.
The airport medical teams and civil aviation officials have been informed of the lists of people coming from China so that they can take the necessary preventive measures.
The temperature sensors for passengers installed at Tunis Carthage Airport will help identify people coming from China suspected of having contracted the coronavirus. We have also a list of travelers to China and other countries where people were infected.
Health authorities stress that efforts are being made to monitor the epidemiological situation related to the coronavirus through the National Observatory for New and Emerging Diseases, the Strategic Center for Health Operations, and the National Laboratory.
The World Health Organization has not yet declared the coronavirus a global emergency and has not recommended any travel or trade restrictions. We are ready to intervene if the situation changes.
The Ministry of Health will remain in touch with people arriving from China for 12 days after their arrival to check their health condition. The minister affirmed her service's ability to provide isolation units in hospitals to separate patients and to protect medical personnel working there in case of an emergency. Tunisian health authorities are distributing brochures and leaflets to travelers from all airports, ports and border crossings, containing the necessary information, recommendations and figures as part of its coronavirus prevention plan. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
And South Africa has warned travelers to be on alert and keep up to date with information about the coronavirus. South Africa attracts thousands of Chinese tourists each year, but tourism authorities now fear a decline in traveler numbers. Here's CGTN's Sumitra Naidu.
The virus is contagious, and those who contract it might not even know. It's common in animals and birds, and only some spread the disease to humans.
It's a novel coronavirus, so it's a completely new virus that has not been seen before. So at this moment, the data is still being collected, and most of the experts are still working on the mode of transmission, how long it's going to incubate for. Some people, they may start to transmit this virus even before they become symptomatic.
Over 100,000 Chinese visited South Africa in 2018. The Department of Tourism is pushing to double this figure by 2021. But this virus has the potential to wipe out all tourism gains and further impact this already weak economy.
South Africa hasn't issued a travel ban as yet, but says it is monitoring the situation closely. China and South Africa are key trading partners. Thousands of Chinese people also live and work here and travel abroad frequently. International SOS is appealing to anyone feeling symptoms to seek assistance immediately.
Currently, there's no treatment, so the treatment will be mainly supportive. So that means, if you have pneumonia or if you need help trying to breathe, then we put you on the ventilator and other medication to help you breathe better.
The timing couldn't be worse for South Africa. This economy too is in poor health, but health authorities say they're prepared.
This virus is spread just like the common cold. So it's when you cough or sneeze, or even when you have any respiratory secretions onto other people. So we are recommending general precautions. So for example, don't touch your face and make sure that you wash your hands regularly with soap and water for at least 20 to 30 seconds at a time. And if you don't have access to water, then carry a small bottle of alcohol hand sanitizer.
International SOS has set up a central website with constant updates on the virus. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg.
And meanwhile, the Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention says it has identified countries within the continent that it considers highly vulnerable to the spread of the coronavirus from China, mostly those with frequent flights there. Dr. John Nkensanson, the director of the Africa CDC, says they are working closely with vulnerable countries to ensure they set up a high standard of prevention. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi reports from Addis Ababa.
Ethiopia, Egypt and Morocco are some of the countries that the Africa Center for Diseases Control says have to put more effort to prevent the spread of coronavirus into their territories.
These countries just need to put extra resources to screen, to enable them do more screening at the airport. Say, for example, if you get 1,000 passengers a day at the airport, say in Addis Ababa, you require much more resources to screen the 1,000 passengers coming from China than an airport that receives only a few passengers from China. So that is the implication on the burden on the resources that are required.
The government set up screening at the Pole International Airport in Addis Ababa for passengers on 23rd January. Its national carrier, Ethiopian Airlines, has at least 36 flights to China weekly. It has yet to pronounce itself on the impact the outbreak of the coronavirus has had on its business. The Africa Center for Diseases Control says the biggest challenge is that the coronavirus has no treatment yet.
Which means people have to wash their hands always. Secondly, when you cough, you have to cover your mouth. Thirdly, that you have to exercise what you call social distancing, which means if somebody feels ill, you isolate yourself. And fourthly, that organizations have to begin to be liberal with the policies to allow people to work from home if they feel like they call in and they report that they are sick.
The African Union will do its first training workshop on the coronavirus in Dakar, Senegal next week, with representatives from 15 African countries being trained on how to diagnose and detect the virus rapidly. Coletta Njohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
U.S. President Donald Trump is unveiling his much-delayed Middle East peace plan at the White House alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The announcement comes as both Netanyahu and his political rival Benny Gantz visit Washington. U.S. officials are hoping that their joint support could give the plan some momentum. Unconfirmed leaks have reported that the measures would be extremely favorable to Israel, allowing it to annex much of the Palestinian territories, including Jewish settlements and all of contested Jerusalem. The Palestinians may be granted some form of self-rule, but under tight restrictions. Trump's press conference is currently underway. Let's listen in.
The vision as the basis for direct negotiations, and I will say the general also endorsed and very strongly with the Palestinians a historic breakthrough. And likewise, we have really a situation having to do with a race that is taking place right now. It will end, and we have the support, and it's very important to say this, of both parties and almost all people in Israel. They want peace, and they want peace badly. This is the first time Israel has authorized the release of a conceptual map illustrating the territorial compromises it's willing to make for the cause of peace, and they've gone a long way. This is an unprecedented and highly significant development. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for having the courage to take this bold step forward.
U.S. President Donald Trump unveiling his much-delayed Middle East peace plan at the White House in Washington, D.C. He's alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, this announcement is coming as both Netanyahu and his political rival Benny Gantz are visiting Washington. U.S. officials are hoping that their joint support could give the plan some momentum, and unconfirmed leaks have reported that the measures would be extremely favorable to Israel. You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Ethiopia, Somalia and Eritrea to revive a regional cooperation plan. And U.S. President Donald Trump has just unveiled his much-delayed Middle East peace plan at the White House.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's go to the Central African Republic, where at least 14 people have been killed and 20 others injured in clashes between two armed groups in the eastern city of Bria. The fighting started on Saturday. That was following the assassination of a member of the Popular Front for the Renaissance of the CAR. The members of the Central African Liberators for Justice movement were accused of being behind that killing. The two groups are signatories to a peace agreement signed last year. Local government officials have started mediation talks to resolve the current dispute, but the tensions remain high. Now, nearly 5 million children in Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger will be in need of humanitarian assistance this year, according to UNICEF. It links the projection to a surge in violence that has included attacks against children and civilians. The insecurity has created significant barriers for children and families trying to access essential services, food and nutritional supplies. Over 3,300 schools in the three countries have been closed or remain out of use. More than 670,000 children across the region have been forced to flee their homes. UNICEF is currently working with partners to try and mitigate the situation. It has also appealed for $208 million to support its humanitarian response in the Central Sahel in 2020.
7 months ago, we had to flee from our village because armed groups arrived. They killed and took away some of the villagers. We got scared, so we fled and took refuge here in Kaya. I have received support and now I'm at school. We were given textbooks and pens because I didn't have any. Thanks to that, I can study for my future.
The French Minister of the Armed Forces, Florence Parly, met with the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, at the Pentagon Monday. They discussed the issue of terrorism in Africa and the possible reduction of U.S. troops on the continent as part of a worldwide review by Esper. CGTN's Daniel Arapmoy with the details.
Groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS have moved closer to well-populated coastal cities in countries like Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. This has made France very blunt about the urgent need for U.S. military support in the Sahel.
U.S. support in Sahel is really critical to our operations. So in this very particular moment where the head of states of the G5 Sahel and President Macron decided to increase the efforts not only in the military field but also on the political field, it seemed that it's even more necessary to keep this American support. But as I said, we fully understand the process the United States is in. Secretary Esper has a difficult job to handle, how to reorganize the American footprint. So we understand the constraints. So we will try, I'm sure we'll try to find the best decision to accommodate all the constraints, the one we have in Sahel and the one that the United States has worldwide.
The U.S. Secretary of Defense Mark Esper says France has asked other European allies for their support in maintaining peace and stability in the Sahel.
France has been a real leader in the Sahel. I give France great credit for what they've done, their commitment, thousands of soldiers, and of course we've mourned the loss alongside them and when soldiers have been killed or wounded. And President Macron is taking a very important leadership role there. So great effort by France. I think France has reached out to other European allies. I think it's time for other European allies to assist as well in the region, and that could offset whatever changes we make as we consider next steps in Africa.
Esper has made clear the U.S. will not withdraw from Africa entirely, but the French have increased their presence in West Africa. This month, France announced additional troops for its 4,500-strong operation in the Sahel, and last month it carried out its first armed drone strike in the region. Daniel Arapmoy, CGTN.
Leaders from Ethiopia, Somalia and Eritrea have met for the first time this year to revive regional cooperation agreed upon in 2018. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello reports on how Somalia stands to benefit from the trilateral meeting in Eritrea.
Somalia's President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo is in Asmara to meet with his Eritrean and Ethiopian counterparts as the three leaders seek to strengthen ties in the Horn of African region. Officials say the talks focused on economic progress, security and other aspects of cooperation agreed upon in 2018 during the first trilateral meeting between the three leaders.
On the security front, the three leaders underscored the need for a concerted effort in tackling insecurity, eradicating terrorism, smuggling of people, weapons and drugs. The leaders also agreed to consult other regional leaders to effectively implement cooperation amongst the Horn of African countries.
Since 2018, meetings like these have taken place in Mogadishu, Addis Ababa and Asmara, with an aim of fostering comprehensive cooperation between governments and the people of the three nations. Experts say out of the three countries, Somalia requires more support from its neighbors as it overcomes years of instability and an ongoing armed insurgency that has claimed thousands of lives.
Somalia needs regional support, especially in the security sector. Regional stability is critical, but we are yet to see any tangible results from the tripartite agreement. The three countries will also rely on backup from powerful allies in terms of social, economic, and political capital.
Experts argue that regional stability will help create a conducive economic environment, with the Horn of Africa region experiencing high population growth, natural resources and access to both the Red Sea and Indian Ocean. Ethiopia and Djibouti already contribute troops to the multinational peacekeeping force AMISOM. Analysts say stabilizing Somalia will go a long way in ensuring that peace returns to the Horn of Africa nation, allowing the region to act as a gateway to the rest of Africa. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
A fresh outbreak of Lassa fever has been reported in Nigeria. So far, at least 29 people have died, and there are 195 confirmed cases. Lassa fever is an acute viral hemorrhagic illness carried by rats. The disease is associated with poor sanitary hygiene practices. It is transmitted from person to person through contact with bodily fluids. Over 300 trained community volunteers are monitoring general sanitation and the hygiene situation in 11 states across Nigeria. The disease control measures are backed by the World Health Organization.
The ministry is putting in place environmental health and sanitation surveillance system. This surveillance system will strengthen the cooperation between state and federal government on environmental health and sanitation issues. It will also help in information data gathering and sharing between federal, state, and local governments.
Still in Nigeria, the city of Lagos has announced a ban on commercial motorcycles and tricycles in large parts of the city. The government says from February, commercial motorcycles and tricycles will no longer be allowed to operate on 50 highways and bridges. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with more on that story.
The announcement of the ban does not come as a surprise at all, and it's actually nothing new. The state government had actually enacted a law banning the operations of commercial motorcycles and tricycles in certain parts of the city since 2018, but it had relaxed on the enforcement of the law, allowing the so-called Okada and Keke Napep operators to break the law with impunity. Now, with the number of these operators swelling and the rate of accidents going up, the government is now being compelled to act. It also cited security reasons as well for the renewed ban.
From 2016 to 2019, there were over 10,000 accidents recorded at the general hospitals alone. This number excludes unreported cases and those recorded by other hospitals. The total number of deaths from reported cases is over 600 as at date. The rate of crime cited by motorcycles and tricycles keeps rising. Motorcycles and tricycles are also used as getaway means by criminals.
Now, in the past year or so, several bike-hailing operators have made entry into the Lagos market, cashing in on the congestion in the city to make money by commuting people around. This ban will definitely affect their operations and threaten their huge investments. And for millions of residents who have come to rely on their services to beat the notorious Lagos traffic, they too will be affected. But the ban does not mean commercial motorcycles and tricycles now will disappear from Lagos roads. They would still be allowed to operate on inner city roads. Besides, if the government relaxes again on enforcement of the law, as we have seen in the past, you can expect Okadas and Kekes to resurface on the city's highways. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, let's now go to Uche Okoronkwo for a look at the day's business news. Uche.
Thanks, Beatrice. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Kenya's GDP is projected to grow from 5.7% to 6.2% this year. And Barrick Gold plans to ship gold worth up to $280 million from Tanzania.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off in Kenya. The country's economy is forecast to grow 6.2% this year. That's up from 5.7% last year. Now, the central bank governor Patrick Njoroge has credited regional trade for shielding Kenya from the effects of a global downturn. The bank expects the recovering agriculture sector, small and medium enterprises, as well as robust private sector credit growth to support that growth. On Monday, the central bank cut the benchmark lending rate for the second meeting in a row to 8.25% from 8.5%. It said the economy was operating below potential and it saw room for a more accommodative monetary policy stance. East Africa's richest economy is enjoying an extended rainy season after several years of drought. The government also lifted caps on banks' lending rates last year, which had inhibited loans to private business. Meanwhile, Barrick Gold will start to ship gold worth up to $280 million from Tanzania. That's after the government lifted an export ban following the resolution of a 3-year tax dispute. Chief Executive Mark Bristow said the world's second-largest gold miner signed a deal on Friday with Tanzania's government, ending a row that dated back to when Acacia Mining ran the Tanzanian operations. Bristow said the shipments will start immediately and confirmed the company was mobilizing the concentrates. Bristow also said that $100 million from the proceeds of the sale of concentrates will go towards paying down a $300 million settlement, which was agreed with the government. As part of the deal, Tanzania will now own 16% of Twiga Minerals, which is a new joint venture set up to manage the Bulyanhulu, the North Mara, and the Buzwagi mines. Now, Liberian President George Weah announced on Monday that the West African nation will launch a call in April for bids to resume offshore oil and gas exploration. That's after years of stagnation. After 2 years in office, Weah did recall how he had promised to promote oil and gas exploration as a potential source of revenue for the poor country.
President Weah made his annual national address, during which he said the amendments to the law on petroleum passed last year hold great possibilities for oil exploration for Liberia.
My fellow Liberians, I am pleased to announce to you today that the government of Liberia, through the Liberia Petroleum Regulatory Authority, will open up the entire Harbour Basin during the next lesson round beginning in April.
The basin where the 9 new blocks are located is part of the last region off the coast of Western Africa, which is yet to be explored for potential reserves.
9 offshore blocks will be put up, allowing competent and reputable international oil and gas companies to bid with the hope of recommencing exploration program.
Since the departure of Exxon and Chevron from Liberia in 2016-2017, there have been no exploration work offshore Liberia, and the sector has been hanging on by a thread. Liberia's last bid round was concluded in December of 2014 with over $60 million in commitments, but concluded unsuccessfully due to political wrangling between the executive and the legislative branches of government. Experts say the importance of Liberia's next bid round cannot be overstated and will determine all future successes for Liberia's fledgling oil sector that has suffered the waves of back-to-back civil conflict. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Now, the fear of a further spike in inflation has compelled Nigeria's Central Bank Monetary Policy Committee to adopt a tightening stance. It's raised the cash reserve ratio for banks in the country from 22.5% to a new level of 27.5%. Now, Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele says the move will mop up excess liquidity in Nigeria's economy and check rising inflation, which has been on an upward trajectory since August last year. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with more on that story.
With Nigeria's inflation on a steady rise over the past 4 months, something needed to be done to check it before it spiraled out of control. And that's exactly what the Monetary Policy Committee did, responding by jacking up the cash reserve ratio from 22.5% to 27.5%. Nigeria's current inflation rate is at 11.98%, partly blamed on insecurity in some parts of the country and the closure of the country's border.
Monetary policy felt compelled that we need to begin to look at what can be done to reverse the trend of this rising level of inflation and prices. And hence, the committee felt in its wisdom that realizing that there's a lot of liquidity in the market, there was a need for the bank to do something to mop the excess liquidity to a level that it considers optimal to be able to run the economy in a way that the level of excess liquidity does not become injurious to the economy.
Last year, Nigeria's central bank raised the loan-to-deposit ratio for commercial banks to 65%. Some fear the MPC decision to raise the CRR and mop up liquidity in the banking system could have a negative consequence on commercial banks' ability to lend and thereby defeat the whole essence of the LDR initiative.
Deposit money banks must be compelled, like we are using prudentials, to ensure that they continue to grant loans to the private sector of the economy. And committee felt that, yes, whereas we are trying to remove the excess liquidity from the market so as to operate within an optimal level of liquidity that is needed for the economy, that the CBN should continue to push on the loan deposit ratio since that was already giving us the kind of results that we expect.
With Nigeria's reserve dwindling in recent months and inflow of foreign capital slowing down, some analysts had been forecasting a possible currency devaluation at some point this year. But the CBN governor is resolute that there's nothing like that in the offing.
A reserve level of about 38 today, right? And crude price at above 57, 60, 65, sometimes hit 70. We believe that we will be able, and we are saying that we should continue to sustain the existing FX, foreign exchange management and stability that we've seen in the market. There's no need for anybody to ever think that an adjustment would happen.
Everything hinges on the price of crude. Should there be a sudden crash in price below the budget benchmark of $57, then devaluation might become inevitable. But the Monetary Policy Committee also warned that the country needs to check its rising debt level and look at other ways of raising revenue to drive the economy. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on Global Business Africa, we'll be looking at George Weah's economic reforms for Liberia. All that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. Find out why corruption has a new English name borrowed from the streets of Nigeria.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Corruption has a new name, so says the Oxford English Dictionary, and that name is chop. Hailing from the streets of Nigeria, the verb meaning to illicitly make money. It was added to the Oxford English Dictionary this month, along with 28 other phrases like rub minds. It is the first time Nigerian English has made an appearance. CGTN's Tuli Shabalala explores more.
When a Nigerian says, "I have saved enough money to buy a two-combo, iron, kettle or fridge," the person actually means they are buying a second-hand item. This is one of the colloquialisms of Nigerian English that have made it into the latest updates of the Oxford English Dictionary.
The way you speak in the public, it looks as if that you are not using a right English word. But this time around, anytime that you are calling Tukumbo, you know that yes, it's a recognized English, no matter where you speak it.
Since the 1970s and 80s, locals have adopted several words and phrases that make up what is known as Pidgin English. It's a mix of English and words from local languages and a range of street slang in Nigeria.
Many people might take it for granted, but it forms a large part of our identities. And when it is being suppressed, or we are being told that there is a better way, or this is what is correct and then this is what's not correct, I think it affects us and it also demeans us.
But getting Nigerian English to be recognized globally was a bit of a challenge.
When we write our characters speaking this Nigerian English, we struggle with foreign editors in the past. It took a lot of action, and we really had to insist that this is actually who we are, who we speak. So it will make things easier. So next time an editor tells you severally is not correct, you say, go and check the Oxford Dictionary.
Other words that made it to the dictionary include danfu, which is the local word for the yellow mini buses. Phrases like mama put, which describes the local street side food seller, and okada, which means motorcycle taxis. This inclusion is making many Nigerians proud.
I like almost every of those words. Okada is a very popular word. There's no day I go I don't see Okada in my mouth. Because I have to stop an Okada man. If I'm driving, I come across Okada people that get me angry. I have to say Okada. So for the fact that Okada is in an English dictionary, it will not be very difficult for me to explain to a white man when he's asking, what's Okada? You know, I said, go and check your English dictionary. What's Mama Put? Please check your English dictionary.
The rapid global rise of Nigerian pop culture across music, film and literature over the last 2 decades has meant that Nigerian use of English has more listeners and readers than ever before. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
To Egypt now, where parents are keen to give their children a unique learning experience during the upcoming winter break. At the Water Science Museum for Children, the eager students learn science through experimenting with various objects. Here's Adil Makhroui with more.
Far from the noise and pollution of Cairo, on the outskirts of the Egyptian capital, where the beauty of nature strikes the eye, the Water Science Museum for Children lies. Built in 1843, this place originally aimed to record the evolution of irrigation in Egypt. In recent years, the museum revamped its content to attract more visitors.
All the experiments we have studied from elementary school to university are presented here in the form of games. We're breaking the mold from the usual educational platform available in schools. We get the kids out of the school buildings in order to learn. Students engage with all their senses, which makes these experiments stick in their minds.
128 educational models are available in 8 different parks here. The museum is one of Egypt's efforts to make learning sciences attractive to students. Some models are designed as puzzles, others require children to come up with their own creative solutions, usually for challenges Egypt faces.
I'm very lucky to live nearby. I bring my kids frequently. The museum gives a unique experience to the kids every time they come. I follow the activities online and come whenever there is something interesting going on. I hope more people would come here. It's unfortunate that this place is not so popular.
With an entry ticket of just 60 US cents, this museum is designed to be a year-round attraction, affordable for all Egyptians.
I love this museum. I have come here many times before. I play with the same experiments and never get bored. And with every visit, I discover that there is more to this place. My favorite is weighing the planets and the moons. I learn things my friends would not usually know about.
Right next to the famous Nile barrages, the museum also exposes its visitors to a great botanical collection. The 8 acres garden attached to it includes rare plants and perennial trees. Adil Al-Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Let's take a look at your sports news now. Here's what's ahead.